Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Baldur's Gate 3 Report Cards. Today is a very special episode because it is the final pair of level 2 spells. After this one, you can expect a complete tier list video, and we'll move on to level 3 spell report cards. We're going to theory craft fixing the bad spells and just more general Baldur's Gate 3 discussion and videos. Today, we're going to cover Spike Growth and Web. Let's start with Spike Growth. Spike Growth. Shape a piece of ground into hard spikes. A creature walking on the spikes takes 2d4 piercing damage for every 5 feet it moves. The spikes are difficult terrain, having a creature's movement speed. This costs your action and your spell slot to cast and your concentration. It has a range of 60 feet, and the spikes themselves have a radius of 20 feet. It lasts for up to 100 turns, and this is learned by druids, nature domain clerics, land druids, rangers, and via magical secrets. In short, Spike Growth puts a large area of spikes on the ground that deals damage and slows enemies. Casting it on top of enemies will instantly deal the damage, and the 20-foot radius of Spike Growth is very large. It's bigger than Web, Grease, Plant Growth, Darkness, Fog Cloud, pretty much everything. It's not the largest in the game of the area spells. Sleet Storm, for example, has a 30-foot radius, and a couple others are significantly larger, but Spike Growth covers a nice area. The damage might not seem very high at 2d4, but 2d4 a lot of times adds up. Enemies who walk through the entire Spike Growth will take damage about 8 times. This can change depending on their line, but it's going to activate a lot if it happens every 5 feet. 2d4 8 times is 16d4 damage, and that's 40 on average. It's also magical piercing damage, so it can overcome some resistances to normal piercing. 40 average damage is a lot. This is going to run over a lot of early game enemies. If we were to compare this to other damaging spells, it would top the charts. It's more conditional, right? Enemies need to walk through it, but it does a ton of damage and it's very reliable. One of the great things about that damage is that it's not based on any roll, and neither is the movement speed being halved. There's no save involved on either part, it just works. This makes the spell very reliable, and because of that, it's really strong in the early game. You can't really buff up your rolls that much in the early game, and it's still going to be strong. Even if you don't focus on buffing up your wisdom, your spell save DC with your build, the spell will still be strong. The way to use the spell is to cast it in a choke point. Bridges and hallways are great options. They're often long, narrow, and enemies need to walk through them to get to you. Sometimes your arena won't have a choke point, and sometimes you just gotta deal with it and you can't cast the spell in that fight. But sometimes you can just go find one, right? For example, in the Sharon Cloister, the arena is just a big, fairly open room. But you can walk back up the stairs you came from, cast Spike Growth on the stairs, and then enemies will need to walk through it to get to you. You've created a choke point that's normally not there. An obvious wrinkle of the spell is that enemies will just try to avoid the Spike Growth area. If you position it well, often they can't, or it will be like a big strain on their movement. But some enemies will have abilities like Misty Step, Shadow Step, or Flight, some other similar ability that will allow them to just harmlessly avoid the Spike Growth. Githyanki in particular are very annoying. The Kraish seems like a great place for Spike Growth, but pretty much all of them have Misty Step, so it kind of sucks. Let's get into the grades now. I have an S for base level early, A for mid, and B for late. This spell is king in the early game because the damage is just so insane. It's going to kill hordes of goblins on its own. In the mid game, the damage is still significant, very high, and having move speed is always useful, but the arenas are less conducive to Spike Growth. They're often in big open spaces, and there are some enemies who are immune to Spike Growth. Shadows, the Shambling Mound, for example. In the late game, the damage is still strong, and having move speed is nice, but again, the arenas are often not super Spike Growth friendly, and you'll continue to run into enemies that resist the damage more or have flat damage reduction, which is very good against Spike Growth. It's still really strong as the game goes on. It just doesn't win encounters on its own like it would in the early game. The middle section is a mix of S and A. Versatility is bumped down a bit because of the constraints of needing a nice space to cast it in. Price is an S because the spell is well worth your concentration, and it can last for a really long time. Even long fights, or if you fight in the same area for multiple fights, it will last. Uniqueness gets an A. I'm going to update that actually, because there are many spells that do a very similar thing. There are so many area spells, like you cast it on an area and it creates a debuff or damage or something. Spike Growth is still very good and it stands out due to the size, the damage, and the reliability, but it's not the most unique. Sometimes other spells are the right choice. Overall, Spike Growth is really strong. It wins fights alone with no support in the early game. You just need Spike Growth to win so many fights. And it's still strong in the late game, and it's reliable. It's getting a solid S. Let's move on now to Web. Web. Cover an area in thick, flammable webbing that can enweb creatures within. An ally can use its help action to try and tear away the webs. This costs an action, your spell slot, and your concentration to cast, and it can be cast in a range of 60 feet. The web has a radius of 13 feet, and it is a dex save spell to resist. There is no upcasting benefit, and the web lasts for 10 turns. This spell is learned by sorcerers, wizards, land druids, swarm keepers, via magical secrets, arcane tricksters, and eldritch knights. Web creates difficult terrain, having enemy move speed and possibly enwebbing targets within. This gives you advantage on attack rolls, it removes their move speed, and it gives them disadvantage on dex saves. This is useful. It's nothing too crazy, but it is a nice debuff to have. There's also a positive feedback loop built into this spell. The spell requires a dex save to resist, and if you fail, you get disadvantage on dex saves. This works very well in theory, because it makes it very difficult to get out of the web once you're caught in it. In practice, though, I've found this spell to not fully work. I'm not sure if this is a well-known bug or not, but in my testing, I've seen that failing consecutive saving throws against being enwebbed doesn't matter. You can be enwebbed, fail the saving throw to break free, and then you'll break free anyways. This means that you don't actually even cut enemies' move speed down to 0, because they lose the enwebbed condition at the start of their turn. I have a few screenshots of my combat logs based on testing that I'll pull up now. The first one here is just to Gale and my PC character. Gale cast web. I had my character run through it, fail the saving throw, and they got the condition enwebbed. Then in turn-based mode, I ended their turns. Smoothie's next turn started. They failed the saving throw again, and they lost the enwebbed condition. I could just act normally. I've also tested this against Ettercaps. Gale walked on the web, failed the saving throw, and got enwebbed. I then ended my turn in turn-based mode. He failed the saving throw again, and he just lost the condition and could act normally. The spell doesn't seem to work for me. It's very frustrating. It makes the spell less reliable. Another inconsistency is how often a roll is required to avoid being enwebbed. I've seen rolls happen after moving 5 feet or 15 feet. I don't know why this is, or if there are like hidden rolls taking place, but the radius isn't exceptionally high for web, and it's not inconceivable that an enemy could just walk through the web, make 2 rolls, pass them both, and get through. It makes the spell very unreliable. One final interaction I have that makes web inconsistent is just the fact that it's flammable. When you're fighting indoors especially, candles are sneaky. People will just leave them around anywhere, and you need to be conscious of this. It is a free action to turn them off, but that's not always doable based on movement or enemy positions. Let's get into the grades now. I'm not a big fan of this spell because its effect is very underwhelming and it's very unreliable. There are plenty of area spells that are not underwhelming that this one just kind of falls behind. I have a C for base level casting all around. Creating difficult terrain is always nice, But this spell is not the best way to do it, and the small radius really holds it back. So that's why it's in C tier. If it could keep enemies trapped for multiple turns, I would like it much more, but it's just not good enough. Superiority gets a D. This is kind of just worse than Grease to me in most cases, which is a level 1 spell without concentration. It's miles worse than Spike Growth, and there are just so many more good spells like this as you level up. Webs are also available to druids with a wild shape slot as a spider, so the spell isn't even the best way to get the effect in many cases. Uniqueness also gets a D. Again, there are so many area spells, and this one just doesn't do more than others. Price is a C. The spell really needs to not be a concentration spell. It's too hard to justify using my concentration on this spell. Overall, I'm going to be putting this in C tier. The more I think about it, the more I want to lower it, but D tier just seems a little too extremely low to me. This is a weak spell, it's outclassed, but it's not useless. Let's move on now to the tier list. Spike Growth is a mid S tier spell. It is very good. I think it's incredibly strong in the early game. It's probably better than most of these spells in the early game, but I don't love that it has no upcasting benefit, so it falls off a bit as the game goes on. I still think it is incredibly strong. We just happen to have 5 very strong spells above it. Web is in the middle of C tier. It's not very good. It's unreliable. I think when I look at the D tier spells, I do think Web is better, but I would rather cast like Shatter or Enlarge, which aren't great spells, but I think their general use case is better than Web. But yeah, that's all I've got for today. Thank you all for watching and sticking with the whole set of level 2 spells. This has been really fun, and I just enjoy talking about Baldur's Gate, so it's been very nice to do these. That's all I've got for today. Thank you all. Have a good one.